Apis Bull Part 1. When God raises up a people, He does so that they stand apart and be the light of the world. However, more often God's people desire to be like other nations, copied their practices, and even fell into idolatry. The study of the Apis Bull is about the sin of idolatry. It explains why God's people committed that sin, where they learnt it, and the consequences of holding on to the practice. We trace the practice from the beginning of ancient right till the end, and do the same with modern Israel. For 400 years, God's people had been slaves to Egyptians, according to the prophecy given to Abraham. During their stay in Egypt, they got corrupted by idolatry and lost sight of God's law, even the Sabbath. At the end of the 400 years, God called them out under the hand of Moses, so that they may obey His laws and keep His Sabbath, which He had instituted in Eden. At Mount Sinai, God entered into a covenant with ancient Israel. He spoke 10 commandments to them, that they might understand the sacred and enduring character of the law, and build the foundation of many generations by teaching their children the binding claims of His holy precepts. Not long after the covenant, when Moses had gone to receive the tables of the law, Israelites grew weary of waiting for Moses and requested Aaron to make them gods who were going to lead them, since they didn't know what had happened to Moses. Aaron, fearing for his safety, and instead of firmly standing for the honor of God, yielded to the demands of the multitude. He built the golden image and presented it to Israel as their God. Israel gladly received the golden image, and the feast of the Lord was proclaimed the following day. Of all images which Aaron could make, like images of fish, snake, locust, or goat, why did he make an image of a calf? And why did the Israelites receive that one? It's simple. They had been taught by Egyptians. Egyptians worshipped a calf that grew into a bull and was called Apis bull. Only one Apis was worshipped at a time. It displayed specific qualities, including a black body with a white diamond on the forehead and an image of an eagle on its back. It also needed a double number of hairs on its tail and the sign of a scarab under its tongue. Also, the calf was to be born through an immaculate conception. Egyptians worshipped their king too. Apis was living, and so did their king. Strong parallels were made between kings and Apis. Both were living gods and were equally reverenced. A calf with specific characteristics symbolized the courageous heart, great strength, and fighting spirit of the king. Apis was considered a manifestation of the king, as bulls were symbols of strength and fertility, qualities that are linked with kingship. Israelites associated God with Apis. They recognized him as a god of great strength, courageous heart, fighting spirit, fertility. And just like Egyptians made Apis to be a manifestation of the king, but theirs was not a living Apis. It was a golden one. Gold represented holiness, so they thought a golden image would be a true representation of God. They proclaimed to be worshipping God of Israel, but they were worshipping the God of Egypt. They said they were worshipping Jehovah, who brought them out of Egypt, but what they have done is attributing to those characteristics of those idols to Jehovah. What constitutes idolatry is the image and character. There is identity around this God, something that related to their personality. Israelites tried to blend their worship of the true God with what they had taken from Egypt. In doing that, they are assigning Jehovah both the form and characteristic. Years went by. Israelites crossed over to Canaan, lived under the rulership of judges, then later kings. But the idea of kings was not God's plan. Israelites demanded for a king. They wanted to be like other nations, have a courageous king with a fighting spirit, and God gave them Saul. Saul and other kings who succeeded him were leaving Apis bulls to Israelites. Because of idolatry, they were taken captive in Babylon. And this time around, they saw that their national greatness depended on letting go of graven images, and were forever cured of the worship of graven images. They let go of the image, but they still held on to the characteristics of the Apis bull. When Christ came, they didn't have the image, but still want the character of Apis. The character they wanted was idolatrous. They had formed an idea of God that had been molded by idolatry. As a result, they failed to recognize Christ. His appearance of being a man of sorrow and grief contradicted the imagination of a god or king. They expected a warrior king with a visible conquering army and an outward display, who was going to deliver them from the Roman bondage. Instead of comparing scripture with scripture, that they might understand truth, they gave credence to what priests and Pharisees taught. The Jewish leaders, Pharisees and priests, believed in the Old Testament, were proud of their forefathers, observed the Sabbath strictly and other laws, had a firm grasp of morality, and believed to be peculiar, yet they had an idolatrous worldview and failed to recognize Christ. Christ tried to take people out of that idolatry by teaching them the nature of his kingdom through parable teaching, taking literary stories and making symbolic applications. He didn't create these parables from the writings of Moses or any inspired book. They were outside inspiration. Parables were the only means God's people could be weaned from idolatrous worldview. However, Jews rejected Christ and his teachings, choosing to hold on to their cherished character of Apis. They failed to let go of the characteristics of Apis and rejected Christ, thus marking the complete failure of ancient Israel to interpret the natural kingdom to its spiritual fulfillment. Amen.